Right, soldering your motors in. So, firstly, according to our plan, we have drone flying forwards. This guy goes clockwise, counterclockwise, counterclockwise, and clockwise. Have a look at your drone and make sure. Top left is a clockwise motor. This is a motor that when you spin the base clockwise, it does up the nut. In our kit's black nut. Counterclockwise motor has a silver nut, it's an opposite thread. So when you rotate the motor counterclockwise, it does the nut up. Same on this side. And then lastly, another clockwise motor at the bottom. Assuming your motor's in the right spot, it's time for your motor wiring. So, these wires are excessively long. You could cut them down really short and join them and have it look really neat and fabulous, but it leaves you no capacity to replace ESCs or motors when the inevitable happens. The inevitable being an uncontrolled landing or a burnt out ESC, resulting in an uncontrolled landing. So, we simply need to cut enough off the end, because you can feel some of it soldered. We need to cut about 5 or 10 millimeters off the end of one wire of the ESC and one wire of the motor. And we don't actually care which wire from the motor connects to the ESC at this point. We're just going to connect a single wire. Once that's done, we need to strip both ends by about 6 millimeters, 6 to 10, something like that. Pick a number that feels good and consistent and do it. So once your wires are stripped, you need to get a tiny piece of heat shrink. I chose clear, because why not? But we've got many, many colors to choose from. Put the heat shrink on one wire and down as far away from the soldering as possible. And when you're soldering, if you get this wire too hot, the heat shrink will start shrinking, which is not what you want. Just like every other wiring job we do, twist the ends of the wires, overlap them, then twist them together. You might want to make them longer than that. Where's the wire strippers? Make them a little longer. And give you something to twist. That's happier. Twist the wires so they're neat, then twist them against each other. You should be able to twist them down pretty nicely into a single layer with no sticky out bits. So, if this bundle is at all too big for your heat shrink, you have bad times ahead. So assuming that bundle looks, I'm pretty sure the heat shrink will go over. You can carefully check if the heat shrink fits, get it back out the way. Then, as with every other wire we've ever soldered, clean the soldering iron, bring it around, a little bit of solder on the tip, and then use the soldering iron to put the heat through the wires and solder away. Doesn't take long. As long as it's glossy, it's good. You don't have to solder right down to the insulation on each end. Once it's soldered, wait till it's cool, then bring the heat shrink in over the top. Perfect length piece of heat shrink. Then we grab the heat gun and we shrink that guy up. Boom, done, record time. All right, that heat shrink done, joint looking good. Note these last two wires. Problem is, depending on which way these go, will alter the direction of the motor. So for now, I've got some press fit connectors. You press the ends and they open up. We're going to use press fit connectors to join these wires in the hope of being able to see which way the motor spins and correct it as required. So once the press fits are all in, we then need a test controller that will run the motor, which I just so happen to have. So we need the battery, Plug the battery into the drone after we get the test controller set up. This test controller is going to let us control this one motor. So with this, we plug this ESC, the one that we're testing, into the third channel with the brown wire on the outside. So 1, 2, third channel, plug it in, move it out the way. Then controller on. Controller on with the throttle at 0. Low throttle. And plug the battery in, we should hear some chirping. And it looks pretty happy. So now using the throttle, I can spin the motor. So sometimes it's really hard to see which way it's spinning. Basically, just give it a good spin. You can feel with your fingernail which way it's spinning. This one's spinning counterclockwise, which if we check with this, that's the exact direction we want. So, these wires go exactly as they are, which is really handy. I suggest you solder them one at a time so you don't mistake them. We'll get all the important bits back out the way. Here we go, little motor. And so we leave, yep. I'm pretty certain they went this way. If they didn't, I'm going to be resoldering. So you, sir, get back in there out the way. Oh, you're so tricksy. So I'll cut the two that I'm joining so I can tell them apart from the other one. There. So if you're ever unsure, you can always go back and test again. There's nothing wrong with doing lots of checking. We need 2 pieces of heat shrink because we're doing 2 wires here. Get on that wire all the way down to the base. And then strip off a good amount of insulation, both sides. And then, same as every other time ever. Twist the wire till it's all tamed. Twist the wires until they're tame. Once they're tame, twist the wires around each other until they are properly controlled. Make sure the heat shrink slides over happily. And then I'm going to have to be quick on this one because the heat shrink is really close to the wire. Which means if the wire gets too hot, bad things happen to my heat shrink. It does what it's intended to do and it shrinks. Job done. I'll just grab the wire there to stop the heat getting the heat shrink. Heat shrink goes over and he's ready to be shrunken. Last one, same process. If you know what it's about, you don't need to watch this bit. If you're excited to see soldering, watch away. Rip them off. Heat shrink goes on. Never forget the heat shrink. Once they're soldered, the heat shrink will not go on. It's a one-way ticket. Strip the wires back. Twist the ends. Tame those wires. Tame. Once they're tamed, twist them up good and proper. Looks good. Clean the soldering iron and we'll get some solder in there So yeah, all that practice you had soldering the power boards should come into play here, because you need to do these guys real quick. Boom, heat shrunk. Now, last step, clean up all the wires out of the way. You got to tame this wire mess into something that looks like it belongs on a drone. So, most of these will need to do a fancy S-bend so that they end up nice and flat. See that? They're basically folded back on themselves and then forward. Also, looking from the top of the drone, it all fits inside the arm. We want it all on top. And once it's all in position, we take a zip tie and we zip tie it down. Now this is going to hold the wires in position. It's also going to hold the ESC. So this one zip tie, because we don't want to add too much weight to the drone. Every bit of weight costs you more in battery and less in speed. So find a spot that will tie all of this down like that. Again, if you look from the top of the drone, it's basically, it's all in line with the arm, which is really, really good. Tighten it up, clean that zip tie up, and you are a quarter of the way to having a drone. So remember, counterclockwise, which is a clock going backwards, clockwise on the black motors, spinning forwards, and get the job done.